I didn't get to make many decisions at those jobs. There was essentially a playbook written and it was handed to me and it said, Chris, go execute. And what I was learning at Spikeball was, wait, there is no playbook. I'm writing it and I get to make decisions. Like every night when I sit down at 8 or 9 to start work, I get to decide what I'm going to do. And that was a very foreign thing for me, but very intoxicating.
This is the Changeup. I'm Keith Hernandez. On this episode, we welcome Chris Reuter, founder and CEO of Spikeball. We talk about how he turned a game he played with friends on a beach into a multi-million-dollar business, his aspirations for making it the next big global sport, what it's like to go on Shark Tank, and how calculated risk led to reward. All right, this week's guest is Chris Reuter, CEO of Spikeball. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first, let's start off with hopefully is what the easiest question is. What is Spikeball?
Spikeball is a company that makes equipment for the sport of round net. A lot of people think this sport is spikeball, so I guess the easiest way to describe it, it may be that trampoline looking thing that you've seen at the beach or at the park, and people are spiking a ball, like a small inflatable rubber ball, kind of playing 2-on-2. Very similar to 2-on-2 volleyball, but rather than hitting the ball over the net, you are spiking the ball on the net.
Got it. And this really just blew up in the last 10 years, right? So this was originally out there in the 80s and then it came back based off of you finding out a few things. A, I'd love to hear about that, but B, if you haven't seen the sport, you probably have. You've been at a park or you've been at a beach, or, you might have seen on ESPN Sports Center or House of Highlights some of these crazy volleys that have gone back and forth. What is it about this sport that just kind of captures people's attention and captures a little bit of their time when they're away from work?
I think one, it's so unique. Like, name any other sport where you're literally hitting a ball down. It's bouncing on essentially what looks like one of those old school jogging trampolines, bounces back up, and also proximity to your opponent. There's no boundaries. There's nothing, with volleyball, there's the net. Tennis, there's sides. And we have no boundaries. We have no sides in our sport. And the only one I can think of that sort of has no real boundaries either is wrestling. But if you think of nearly every other sport, there's inbounds, out of bounds, etc. And while our two teams start on opposite sides of the net, once the ball's in play, again, no real boundaries. So, and I don't know, like, let's say you've never seen it before and you're walking by and you see somebody playing in the park, you're going to stop and watch for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and you're just intrigued. You're probably confused. And if you're fairly, open to chatting with strangers, you're probably going to walk up to them and say, what the heck is this? And that happened to us all the time. It still happens now. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's unique. And, we have seen a lot of, without getting on too much of a tangent, we do a lot of work with schools and PE teachers. And they've told us, if you've got a typical classroom of 30 kids, there's usually 5 or so that are not into whatever the main activity is, whether that's, baseball, basketball, or tennis, God knows what it is. But those 5 kids that are not into those mainstream sports, those are the ones that are most attracted to spikeball. And I think that's because the mainstream sports, they probably know that they don't have much of a chance going up against the guy or girl that's a pretty solid athlete in that sport. They're already kind of
Right.
starting a few notches behind. But spikeball is so weird. I think they think like, wait, nobody's good at this. This thing is brand new. Everybody's starting at the same level. So I'm okay playing and looking like a fool for the first 10 minutes because everybody's going to look like a fool playing for the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, there is that real learning curve. And it's funny that you describe the way most people learn about it, because that's exactly how I saw it the first time. I was in Brooklyn in Prospect Park. And I think me and my friend were just making fun of it. We're like, what are these idiots doing over there? And then we kind of, every couple of minutes we got closer and closer to, we were close enough to ask them what it is they're playing. Describe that learning curve. Describe the first time you played and describe what it means to kind of go through that learning curve in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the equipment. So you've got the round net that's about 36 inches across, it's about 7 inches off the ground. Then you've got the inflatable rubber ball, which is about the size of an orange. And it's the ball that if you barely hit it, it's going to go pretty far. So if you watch people that are first playing, even if you get the world's greatest athlete, he or she is going to look like a fool the first 10 minutes playing. But once you get that, you're going to barely hit the ball, but it's going to go much farther. Then you're going to hit it way too soft. And, it takes a little bit of time to sort of get the feel for it. But you don't need to be a world class athlete to play. Like we see 10-year-olds playing with their grandparents and they can actually get a rally going. So once you sort of get the feel for the ball, then you're good for the most part. But where we notice that people are hooked is when you get that first rally. You get that first sort of spike that goes past your opponent, then you're hooked. And the cool thing about our sport, and let's say compare it to basketball. No matter what happens, I am never going to be able to dunk at basketball,
Right.
right? I'm 5'9", and okay, chances are 1 in a million I'm going to get to dunk, but really, it's never going to happen. With spike ball, really anybody can just put in some time, but usually you get the hang of it after 10, 15 minutes. If you play for a couple hours or play for an hour, you're going to have one of those like amazing shots that the set you thought there was no chance it was going to go, but it did. And just, that level of excitement, like high fives are kicking in, trash talking to your opponent is kicking in. But once that rally, and rally means, it went back and forth to each team a couple times. If we can get you to play that long, we know you're going to play long term. If you give up in those first 10 minutes and you get frustrated, then getting you to play a second time, probably going to be a little challenging.
Let's go back to the beginning because you're not the inventor of Spikeball, correct?
Correct.
This is much of a reclamation project. How did that happen? How did you become the CEO of Spikeball?
Yeah, so you're correct. I did not invent it. It came out in 1989. So I was
Okay.
14 years old at that time. And some friends down the street bought a couple spike ball sets at local toy store. Those friends are actually friends with my older brother, and they started playing a bunch. And I thought it was pretty cool, but I was kind of the annoying younger brother, so I wasn't really allowed to play, and I'd kind of just stand in the background and played a little bit when I was a kid, not a whole lot. But then fast forward to 2003, me, my brother, those same childhood friends went on a trip to Hawaii, and those childhood friends brought this beat up old spike ball set from the 80s.
Cool.
What little we knew, it launched in 1989 and they killed it in 1991.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it had a very brief life. For some reason, it didn't work. During that trip in Hawaii, we were in Kauai. That's where I really got the bug. And it was my brother and I versus these two other brothers. So just brother rivalry, sort of death match. Of course, we smoked these guys. And I was like, wow, I had an absolute blast. And people would walk up to us, strangers, and ask us same three questions. What's that game? How do you play? And where can I get it? And we'd give the same answer like, oh, made it in the 80s. Company's not around anymore. So you can't really get it. But that happened enough times where we started talking about, wonder if we can like bring this thing back to life.
So that conversation was already happening in Kauai. You guys were like, this is pretty
Yeah.
interesting. So many people are coming. You identified it that quickly. Cool.
Yeah, and I think Tim and Pat are the brothers that owned the set. Pat had been playing kind of on and off since '89, and I think he had kind of been talking about doing it a bit more. And Hawaii's when I first got involved, and yeah, we did what most people with ideas do was we talked about it,
Maybe had
and
some
we talked
drinks and
about it for exactly right. But that went on for years. Like we did nothing after that Hawaii trip for a
okay.
couple of years, and then finally, my guys, I'm sick of the talk. I'm going to talk to some attorneys and see if we can like legally do this. So
And so what did the attorney say?
they said, yeah, you can do what you want. The trademark, which protects the name Spikeball, has been expired for 10, 15 years or something like that. And they said there was no
Oh,
patent
wow.
on the product itself. So they're like, yeah, it's wide open. I think we got the trademark for $800. Like, all you have to do is file for it and it's yours. So nobody had claimed it. We did talk to the inventor of the game to see if we'd do something together, and that didn't quite pan out. So we went ahead and did it on our own and raised some money between me, my brother, my cousin, and those childhood friends, and a few others. And that was 2007, and we launched in 2008.
Wow. So, okay. I'm really fascinated with the year in between there, right? So you have the brand name, you have the
Yep.
trademark, but you don't have any product and you don't have any experience building a product, right? This is not your world. You weren't building toys or games. How did you go from trademark to product?
We actually launched before we had the trademark, so we were crossing our fingers that we were going to get it. Somebody else owned spikeball.com though.
Okay.
And I was nervous. I was like, all right, it's probably one of those domain companies that's going to charge us an insane amount of money for .com. So even if we get the trademark, if we can't get .com, I don't think we can go with Spikeball. I think we need to come up with a new name. And I spent months trying to come up with something. I think like Spike It was my best, and even that was just lame. But wound up reaching out to the owner of Spikeball.com, thinking it was a company, but I call the number and it's this guy that I don't know. I think he lived in like suburban Baltimore or something like that. He was like a dad, and I said, "Yeah, I'm Chris Reuter, thinking about bringing Spikeball back." And I thought he like knew what Spikeball was, and I was like, "Yeah, you own Spikeball.com, right?" He said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He said, "But I kind of thought it was a cool word, and I thought my kids may want to build a website one day, and they never did anything with it." And I'm like, "Oh, well, would you be interested in selling it?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure. How much you thinking?" And I don't know, $100. He's like, "Sure." So we got, and I didn't want to show my cards like how excited I was. So I was like, all right, I'll give you $50 now. And then once you transfer it, I'll give you the other 50. And he's like, all right, that's fair. Super
That's
nice guy. And that's how we got spikeball.com.
Did you eventually send him a set after it had lunch?
I don't know if I did. A few years later, he did like kind of stumble on us and like send a note saying, "Oh my God, like congrats, you guys are doing really well." And so that was pretty funny. But yeah, so once we got that, then I was like, okay, I'm comfortable going with the name Spikeball. I'm confident we'll get the trademark. There's nothing else out there, and it was trademarked at one time, so I think that increased our chances of being able to get it again. And yeah, 2007 and part of 2006 as well. That's when I think we legally incorporated in 2007. I remember being very excited when he opened our first checking account. I don't know why I thought that was cool, but seeing the company name on the checkbooks,
That's
like
a big
paper
one. Yeah.
checks. Yeah, right. But that year was primarily spent finding a manufacturer, designing the packaging, the logo, the colors of everything. And Tim Kennedy is one of the neighbors that lived a couple doors down, good friend of childhood. And at the time, he worked for Ronald McDonald House, the nonprofit
Yeah.
arm of McDonald's. He happened to know the guy that runs the company that makes all the little plastic toys for Happy Meals that go
Uh,
in, McDonald's
Very
Happy
cool.
Meals.
Yeah.
So they wound up being our first manufacturer. So he introduced me to them, and I didn't know anything about manufacturing. But I guess before you have to manufacture, we had to actually design the product. And so another friend of Tim's, this guy Jason Epley, great guy. He's product designer, graphic designer, web designer, etc. So after work, after my day job, I'd go from work to Jason's office, and then we'd sit at his computer and would just talk about, okay, what do we want the general feel of the product to be, what do we want the design to be, and here's the original one, how can we make it so much better. The original one, it came out in the late 80s, so of course it was fluorescent pink,
Yeah.
so we had to update that a bit. But I've got a degree in photojournalism, and I had been selling online advertising, so I had zero expertise in any of this stuff, but it's worked.
Yeah. So I think at that time, we were working at the same company. We were both at Microsoft at that time, right? You were in Chicago office and I was in New York, but the company's 103,000 people. So you were no slouch. It's not like you were just kind of toiling away at a desk job. You had a pretty big job. How are you balancing this stuff out? How are you finding the time to build this company while also working a very big full-time job?
The first couple years, I was able to keep day job and night job pretty darn separate. So during the Xbox years, if you will, I'd do that. I'd come home, hang out with wife and kids. They'd go to bed around 8 or 9, and then spikeball work would begin. And I'd do that from probably 9 at night until 1 or 2 in the morning. And while they were late nights and I wasn't getting a whole lot of sleep, I'd find myself just with this crazy level of energy, even at 1 or 2 in the morning, because I was actually building something. Now, my role at Microsoft, I wasn't really building anything. I was selling something, and I had a quota every month or every quarter, I forget. And I was basically told, go sell. And I did. And I was a good salesperson. So the blessing and curse of a sales job is it's very easy to tell if you're doing your job. Are you at quota or not? So I was a pretty good salesperson. So I hit my number more often than not. But as Spikeball kept growing, then that's when I'd start sneaking away during the day and meeting people to do Spikeball work. Yeah, then they started blended the 2, but I also didn't feel all that guilty about sneaking away because I was hitting my number.
Yeah.
So I was doing what was required of me at the day job, and I was like, "Should they really care if I'm sitting at my desk or doing whatever?" So, at least that's how I rationalize it in my head.
And something even harder, right? For people that have never worked in ad sales to understand is there's the base pay, but then there's also the bonus pay. And so when you're hitting your number, you're making even more money. So that I
Yes.
can imagine was probably even harder to walk away from. Do you remember the inflection point where you said, I got to focus on this full time and I got to give up this nice job?
Yeah, it was difficult. So first couple years of Spikeball was at Xbox, left Xbox, went to a little startup for a little under a year, so another advertising related thing, and then went to Live Nation for I think it was there maybe under 2 years, and it was at Live Nation where I quit and went full time to Spikeball. But during the Live Nation time, the year that I quit, we hit $1 million in annual sales at Spikeball with zero full time employees.
Oh, wow.
And about the year before that, so I think the year before that, maybe I finished the year maybe at $450,000 in revenue or something like that. And I'm pretty good about reaching out to sort of experts or mentors or people that know much better than me. And I'm like, hey, I've started this company. Things are going crazy well. And, what should I do next? Everybody was telling me, quit your day job, go full time. And this guy, Troy Hennekoff, Chicago mentor to a lot of people in sort of the tech world, he was like, Chris, you've got this rocket ship. And if it doesn't get your full time attention, it will crash and burn. You've got something special here. Give it the attention. And while that sounded nice, I had 3 kids under the age of 4. I had a mortgage, a car payment, and I had a really cush gig at Live Nation. Like, the one weird thing about the Live Nation job, most ad sales jobs, the salary is rather low, but the upside is your commission.
Yep.
Back then at Live Nation, the salary was like crazy high. You still could get a good commission, but you could lead a nice life on the salary alone. So again, I hit my number, so that was great. But I was like, am I crazy to be walking away from this comfortable life here? Benefits, vacation, the whole thing to chase this plastic net and rubber ball.
Yeah.
But, my wife and I, we talked about it probably a year and a half leading up to the day I quit. And I can't tell you how many different spreadsheets I do. Like, okay, here's what I make a day job. Here's what Spikeball has to do in order for me to come close to, I didn't want to or I couldn't, afford to take a huge cut because babies need food.
Right.
So there was a lot of that analysis. And I don't know, I think a lot of people look at entrepreneurs or people that quit their jobs and like, oh my God, you're such a risk taker. I could never do that.
Yeah.
And I think we're very deliberate. They're calculated risks that we take. So if I had quit my job on day one before I'd sold a single spike ball set, that is risk taking. It's also stupid.
Yeah.
Taking the time to talk to a lot of just smart people and really think it through, that's what gave me the confidence that day in September, I believe it was, to call the boss and give my 2 weeks notice. And, you know, one of the best days of my life. It was actually a couple weeks ago. It was the 8th anniversary of me quitting. So
Oh, congratulations.
it's a special day.
Do you remember that feeling after telling your boss and walking through what you're going to do? Was your boss supportive of it? It sounds like your family was super supportive of it.
Family was great. So I was based in Chicago, but my boss was based in New York. Super nice guy. When I called to share, let him know that I was leaving, it was like he was ready to offer me more money to stay. And by that time, I think 7 of my 8 hours at the day job were spike ball. I was not a
Nice.
good employee. But
Yeah.
again, I was hitting my number. So, yeah, I said something. He's like, "Oh, where are you going?" I think he thought I was going to like some other competitor. And I'm like, actually, no, I'm kind of making a big change. And like, remember that spike ball thing I told you about a couple years ago? He's like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, it's kind of becoming a thing, and I'm gonna give it a full shot. And he was super supportive, and he sent me a couple notes over the years. And actually, one of my bosses from Microsoft, actually my only boss from Microsoft, he now is our head of sales at Spikeball.
Oh, no way.
So yeah, love that we were able to reconnect, and he's been awesome.
That's amazing. And I love this story. The calculated risks is so important, right? Because I agree with you there wholeheartedly, right? For me, for a long time before jumping into my own thing, there was like a monetary thing that a hurdle that I needed to get over. But there was also that emotional hurdle of taking the calculated risks. outside of the money, because it does sound like there was a really clear revenue growth pattern there. Were there other things that went into that calculated risk for you to help you propel forward?
Yeah, a lot of it was general happiness. I never got that rush at any of my sales jobs. Even if after I closed a huge deal, like I'd be happy about that, but not a whole lot of satisfaction and not much of an interest in wanting to really go deep and contribute above and beyond my sales at these jobs. I didn't get to make many decisions at those jobs. There was essentially a playbook written and it was handed to me and it said, Chris, go execute. And what I was learning at Spikeball was, wait, there is no playbook. I'm writing it and I get to make decisions. Like every night when I sit down at 8 or 9 to start work, I get to decide what I'm going to do. And that was a very foreign thing for me, but very intoxicating.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen as much anymore. It still does from time to time, but back then when somebody would ask me, a friend or family would just ask about, hey, that spike ball thing, how's it going? I could talk for 6.5 hours if that person would listen that long about whatever it was. But my level of excitement, it was something I'd never experienced in my work life. So that was a huge draw to me that like, wait, you can actually enjoy work and like be pumped about it? Like,
Yeah.
shit, who knew?
That's so amazing. And so what was the conversation like with your wife? Because she had been part of this early part of it, right? Like the
Yep.
growth of it and seeing it as this part-time passion project. What was that conversation like with her to kind of go into it full time?
She could not have been more supportive. She unfortunately saw me on my bad days, like well before Spikeball. I worked for Monster.com for about 5 years, the big job board. And that was like a hardcore sales job for a couple of years there. I was there. It was like do your 80 to 100 dials a day.
Mm,
And if you miss 1 month, you're on a performance plan and just really cutthroat stuff. And on those months when I would miss or the final few days of the month, I would just become evil and just real angry. And, I'd come home and she'd have to deal with that. And she saw complete opposite side of me when I'd be talking about spikeball stuff. And oh wait, like happy smiling Chris when he's talking like around work, like that's kind of a foreign thing. So I think she saw like she hasn't said this, but I'm assuming she'd agree. Like she probably saw a happier home life if I were to make this change. Risk would definitely go up, at least in the short term, but the upside may be much greater.
and now the kids, if I'm doing the math right, teenagers, is that right?
Yeah, 13, 12, and 10. So Beckett's my 13-year-old. He was born about 3 months before we launched the company.
Oh my gosh, wow. And what do they know about entrepreneurship, right? Is this something that you had always thought you wanted to do? Is this something that was part of your life growing up? And are you instilling that in your children?
Yeah, I of course want my children to take whatever path they want. I am heavily biased towards entrepreneurship, so I am trying to share as much as I can about the business. And when we're having dinner, I'll bring up a random, hey, we found some new software for our customer service tickets, and here's why I think it's pretty cool. And just weird conversations like that. But yeah, my dad was an entrepreneur. He had a furniture store for a while, had some rental apartments. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My brother worked some odd jobs for my dad. I did furniture delivery in high school, and my grandpa had this tractor store and did like farm auctions, and I'd help him. And the thing that I loved about their jobs was, again, they got to decide when they woke up every day, like, what am I going to do? And they had that control over their personal lives. And I don't know what it was, but when I was at Microsoft and the other jobs, I remember the terrible feeling, or it just didn't feel right that I had to request vacation days.
Yeah.
And like I was
So
nervous to
true, man.
ask for them,
Yeah. Sheepish. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry about this, but I need to see my family for a week. Yeah.
right? And it's like, wait, we're all adults here. I should be able to just go into the website and click the days that I'm going to be off, and everybody should be good with it. You guys should trust me that I'm going to be smart enough with my time and smart enough with my business. And it was never really that way. It was like, man, Chris, if you're not hitting your number, like, yeah. So just that kind of thing. And I don't know, there was very little autonomy in general there. So a lot of the way that I'm trying to build and influence the culture at Spikeball is all right. how'd things happen at Microsoft? All right, if I do the opposite, we should be in pretty good shape. Disclaimer: Microsoft was a very long time ago. I was a part of a tiny division. I'm sure that most of it is great. That was during the Ballmer days, and I do think he was not much of a culture guy, and he was
Yeah.
just, let's jam it down your throat. From what I understand, the culture now is much, much better. So I don't want to rag on it too hard.
And yeah, and I'll give the disclaimer there. Advertising side was a, small percentage of what the enterprise business did too, and was trying to kind
Yeah.
of compete against the Yahoos and the Googles of the world and the
Yep.
AOLs at the time in a very weird space. I love that you went to the culture of your current company. So I'd love to go there right now. Very different between you and your buddies putting your own money in, bootstrapping it and kind of running it after your work hours to now having employees. How many employees do you have? And then what are some of those specific lessons that you're making sure fit into the culture to make it more autonomous?
Yeah, so we've got 40 people now. Nearly all are in the US, but one in Canada and a couple in Europe. Everybody's remote. So we've been remote more or less since day one. So it's
Okay,
not
cool.
like we're all in an office seeing each other every day. So, okay, how do you build a culture in a remote fashion? In general, I've never been a fan of authority. I didn't really do well in school. I didn't like it at all. Gotten not a lot of trouble, but some trouble. And I know I don't like authority, so I do not want to be the boss that's breathing down somebody's neck or wagging a finger or coming up with a list of 10 things they have to do and they have to be at this time by this time. Like, I want to hire the smartest people I can so I don't have to worry about what time they start or finish work. I just trust them and I know they're smart enough to figure it out. I'm here to give them whatever help they want. If they want to brainstorm something or if they need new software or God knows what it is, I'm here to support them, but I am not here to tell them what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And I think that results in a culture of trust. I talked to a
Absolutely.
lot of other friends, and pre-COVID, a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, if they're not employees aren't sitting next to you, how do you know if they're doing work?" Like, well, I trust them, and if let's I don't know, Izzy, our social media person, if I notice that there's no social media posts being posted, I know she's not doing her job, but also I know that's never going to be the case because Izzy loves her job. She's amazing at it and she does it all the time. So, on the flip side, just because somebody maybe is sitting in a cubicle 10 feet from you in your office, do you know that they're working?
Right.
No. You know that they're sitting at the desk, but maybe they're just scrolling. Who knows? But
Yeah, one of my last corporate jobs, an old school kind of sales executive boss came in who, if you were at your desk before he got there, it was a sign that you were working hard. And I remember having the conversation, was like, all those people are missing their numbers because they care about being here on time for you and getting you a coffee. That kind of was one of the last straws for me on the sales side where we're going to fail because you're valuing the wrong things there.
yeah, attendance shouldn't matter. Like in school, I don't think it should matter. Like I'm proud that my children will never get a perfect attendance award. Sometimes vacation is more important than perfect attendance. Like, when I first left Live Nation, went full time, and we started getting employees, from time to time, I would find myself being that boss. Like,
Yeah.
I remember I talked to Skylar one time, employee of ours, and it was like, I don't know, Tuesday at 10 or something. He lives in California. And we were doing our weekly one on one, and he was telling me how he had just wrapped up a game of tennis
Hmm.
Tuesday at 10 a.m. And I wanted to just like, dude, what the? You're supposed to be working. But then I was like, wait, Skylar like texts me at midnight, and I know he bleeds black and yellow Spikeball colors, and the guy is just so motivated. And if he wants to play tennis on Tuesday at 10, fine. I know that he's getting his work done. So I need to put my fragile ego aside and trust. One of our values at Spikeball is trust until you shouldn't. I want everybody leading with the first step of trust and not like, how's that person going to be screwing me? Or are they really doing what they're telling? No, let's trust them until we shouldn't.
That's such a great value, and more companies need to do that. It's funny. I remember hearing this. I think the founder of Patagonia talking about culture and allowing his team to go surfing and skiing when there's great things. And it was Guy Raz who was like, "How can other companies do this?" He was like, "You can't. You have to build it in from day one." And he was like, "If you take what I did and try to replicate it, you're going to have a bad company because it's what I do." And so I
Hmm.
love that you brought that in early and continue to think about it. I'd love to talk about how you're selling these things, right? I heard in another interview that you did, the sales channel is not the typical audience that you would think. It's not volleyball players, basketball players, or these athletes. You're actually hitting with gym teachers and youth groups way more. How did you come to that realization?
Yeah, so the first 5 years we were in business, we only sold on Spikeball.com. Maybe we went Amazon year four, something like that. I forget, but and that wasn't because in hindsight, I was so smart and I thought that was a great way to build a relationship with customers. I just knew that no stores would carry our product, and I'm like, it's kind of our only option. So started selling there. And when orders would come in, of course, the first few months were what I call pity sales from friends and family that, oh, Chris started this thing. He's probably going to fail, but I'll buy one just to be nice.
Yeah.
So the first month or two are decent, and then sales just like tanked after those were over. But when those sales would come in, I got an email every time, and I had that customer's email address. So let's say that I saw Keith ordered a set from New York. I'd reply and say, "Hey Keith, thanks for the order. I'm actually going to be driving to the post office tonight, so I'll drop your box off then. It should show up in a couple of days. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, how'd you hear about Spikeball?" And most customers would ignore that, but enough, I think we're intrigued enough by what kind of weird ass company has the CEO emailing me saying he's driving to the post office
To
tonight to
drop this
drop off
off.
my
Yeah.
box. And in that situation, I was literally going to my basement, which was our first like warehouse. And right around midnight or so was when I would do shipping. So I'd go to the basement and grab one box. If it was a really good sales day, maybe I'd grab two or three. And then I'd drive my 1998 Subaru Outback about 2 miles to this late night deli slash post office. And I'd mail the packages and I'd come home and do a couple more hours of work. But in that email, I'd also say, how'd you hear about it? And I was able to identify three buckets. So one was faith based youth groups, which was bizarre to me. A bunch of people were talking about Young Life, and I'd never heard of Young Life, but I Googled it, and turns out it's this huge Christian high school thing where thousands of these groups all over the country, all over the world, and they get together. I don't know if it's once a week or once a month, but everybody meets at a different kid's house. And that may mean there's 60 high school kids meeting
Oh,
at your
wow.
house one week. And it's a 2 hour meeting. 1 hour is talking about your faith, and the second hour is some sort of group activity.
Okay.
And I was learning that that group activity was quickly becoming Spikeball, and it
Oh,
started in
wow.
like Brentwood, Tennessee, like suburban Nashville, and learned that yeah, the seed had been planted in faith-based youth groups and Young Life. So I started shipping free sets to Young Life groups all over the place. And another group that I identified was PE teachers. So, PE teachers, budgets are always getting cut. They're always looking for new games, and PE teachers, at least the ones that are engaged, I think a lot of us have had those PE teachers where it's just former high school athlete that just wants to play and just play
Yeah.
dodgeball and just
Yeah.
be
Throws
that
out the
guy.
balls and sits in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah, just smokes in the corner or whatever.
Yeah.
But one of them, I remember him telling me, like, yeah, I pay $60 for each badminton racket.
Oh,
So
wow.
trying to get an entire class of kids playing I can't afford it. But Chris, yours is $60, and that's good enough for four players at a time. That's $15 a student. And you replace parts for free forever. My kids are super hard on stuff. So if I break something, all I have to do is email you and you'll ship me new stuff. Yep. And ultimate frisbee players.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
No clue how it happened, but again, hey, thanks for buying. How'd you hear about us? Oh, I was at an ultimate tournament I saw it, or I play on ultimate, or my ultimate coach. And so we started sponsoring ultimate frisbee teams. College kids would reach out to us asking us to sponsor them, which is code for we need gas money to get to our next tournament. So I'd give them a couple $100, and I'd say, all right, guys, you have, I don't know, 8 tournaments this season. I'm going to ship you 9 Spikeball sets. I need you to play at every single tournament during your downtime. Text me pictures so I know you actually played, and that's going to be my content for social media. But more importantly, give away one set to your favorite opponent at every tournament.
Oh, cool.
And that was really cool, right? If you think of most sporting events, the only one that gets sort of the prize is the team that won.
Yeah.
And in our culture, yes, that's important, but it's way more important how you play the game. So imagine you just finished playing against somebody, and win or lose, your opponent walks up to you and hands you a Spikeball set and says, "Hey, we're sponsored by these guys, and they wanted us to give this to the team that I just enjoyed competing against the most, and that was you."
That's really cool.
That's going to hit hard, right? Like, so To this day, you cannot go to an ultimate tournament now and not see a bunch of Spikeball sets. The shared DNA between the two sports is crazy, crazy large. They're big on spirit of the game as well, and we've adopted a lot of what they've done. But before I was asking that question, how'd you hear about us? I knew nothing about marketing, and I just assumed like, okay, it'll be 18 to 34-year-old males, and that's about as narrow as I could get. Coca-Cola doesn't have enough money to go after a target that broad. But I didn't know.
Yeah.
But once I identified those three, like, okay, I've identified these tiny fires. I'm going to pour gas on them now. And gas back then, and still to this day, a lot is us shipping free sets. We noticed a couple of years ago that some of the world's top CrossFit athletes were posting videos of them playing Spikeball in the boxes, gyms. And we quickly learned that it was traveling really fast through the CrossFit community. So we started sponsoring the CrossFit games, sending free stuff to athletes. And we learned that they were attracted to it because if you think about a typical CrossFit exercise, there's not much fun involved. You don't see people
Yeah.
smiling. They're hardcore, they're competing and being very serious. And Spikeball was bringing some levity, bringing some fun, and allowing some high fives to actually happen. And while working on your twitch muscles and hand eye coordination and stuff like that. So trying to remain as close to the community as possible. Had I launched in 2008 and through some miracle a bunch of retail stores would have taken the product, I never would have been able to ask the question, how did you hear about it to our customers? Because I'd have zero access to them.
Yeah, that's such a powerful insight. Do you think the connective tissue is that level of fun, right? Between all of those audience groups? Because I don't think anybody on the marketing side, you could have hired the best creative agents in the world, would have come up with that quadrant, right? Like, this is who you need to go
Absolutely.
after. Yeah.
No way. Very disparate. And none of them were, faith is not an important part of my life. I've never been a PE teacher and I've never played a game of Ultimate in my life. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs will sort of take their own experience and say, okay, if it worked for me or whatever I'm into, the rest of the world probably will as well. And you got to remove yourself from it. I was speaking with a woman a few years ago. She was getting ready to launch a new energy drink or something kind of like a Gatorade. And before she'd even launch, she's like, this absolutely is not going to be a soccer mom thing. It's going to be, she had the community down. And I was nervous. I'm like, and I don't think the drink is around anymore, but she wasn't going into it wanting to learn.
Yeah.
Her mind was made up who the audience was going to be. I had my mind made up when we launched. I thought it was going to be volleyball players. And I
Yeah.
spent a lot of money on Google AdWords and stuff like that. Every time you type volleyball in, Spikeball would show up. And it drove a ton of traffic to our website. Zero revenue, but a lot of traffic. That was me trying to say, oh, it's logic. The rules are nearly the same. They'll love it. Volleyball players hated it. I went down to the beach in Chicago a couple times and talked to some pretty high-end volleyball players and said, oh, I got this Spikeball set. Do you want to play? And they were super cool to play with it, but they hated it. They're used to being good at their sport.
Yeah.
And I showed up with this new thing that made them look like a fool. And like,
And
no, I'm
nobody
going to
wants
stick
that.
with this. Yeah. So following the audience was something it took me a little while to learn.
It's such a fantastic insight. And I think it plays across any type of company because I think too often we get hyper focused on that audience and we think we know our target audience. I'd love to talk a little bit about the Shark Tank and how that came about, right? You actually got one of the sharks to say that they would invest in it, but tell the story a little bit of what happened there and what ended up coming from that.
Yeah, yeah. So we were on in May of 2015, so 6 years ago now. It was an incredible experience. So I'll get notes from entrepreneurs from time to time saying, "Hey, should I go on it?" Or "I'm going on in 3 weeks. What should I do?" And my answer to everybody is yes, absolutely do it. It's a fantastic experience. Just make sure you do your homework. When you see the sharks being mean, supposedly mean, or just really ripping this person to shreds, it's most likely because that person just didn't do their homework. So I was very nervous going on. When I flew out there, I assumed that before we filmed that I'd at least shake hands with the sharks and then, maybe
So
a
you
cup
didn't
of
meet them
coffee
beforehand?
backstage. No, when the entrepreneur walks through the doors, that's the first time they ever set eyes on the sharks. Like it is real.
Wow. Okay.
So and to make it even worse, you walk through the doors and five sharks are lined up, and I think you like stand on an X or something like that, and you're maybe 10 feet from them, like you're like close. And they tell you before you walk out there, like, hey, Chris, go stand on the X and stand there in complete silence until they yell action or go or whatever. But they have to get the lights and sound and stuff ready. So you're just standing there with your arms at your side, 10 feet facing the sharks. Like, it could not be more awkward. It was
Yeah.
probably only a minute, but it felt like about 6 months. Um, and
Intimidating too,
then
right?
absolutely. Like, oh my God, these superstars. Like, I only see you people on TV and I can't believe we're 10 feet. And oh my God. But wait, somebody's going to yell something in a minute. And I now have to deliver this memorized 2 minute. Hi, my name's Chris Reuter. My company is Spikeball. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm looking for blah, blah, blah. Spikeball is blah, blah, blah. And I have always been terrible at memorization. So I was most nervous about that part. And I can't tell you how many times I did that presentation in my head out loud, driving to and from work every day, recording my voice and just listening to that when I'd go for walks in the neighborhood. And just, the night before we filmed, it was me and we had four players. And, they put you up in a hotel down the street from, I think it was Sony Picture Studios. And we're in the parking lot of the hotel, and I lined up 5 rocks on the side of the parking lot. Each rock was a shark, and we'd practice our walk in. Like, okay, guys, everybody, let's, I don't know, start with our left foot first and see how that works.
Like that precise.
Right? And I was first, and the four players are behind me. And as we're walking up, I'm humming like dun 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 dun, doing the theme song. And then I'd do the whole pitch, and then we go back and do it again. We must have done it 35 times that night, like at midnight, pitch black in this parking lot. And I don't know, they only shoot a couple times a year, but when they shoot, I think they shoot like 8 days straight.
Oh wow. Okay.
And you're given like a window of like, okay, Chris, you're going to fly out on Monday, and you're going to film Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe Thursday, but we'll let you know once you get out here. So you wake up the next morning not knowing if you're going to get the call if you're filming that day. So we did get the call. We showed up, but then we sat around in the studio for probably, I don't know, 5 hours or something like that. Then eventually got to go in and do, did the pitch, and that went really well. So I did the memorized part, and that was the part I was most nervous about. When the Q&A started, I was able to exhale a little bit because I knew I had a great business. I knew my numbers, and even if this thing went terrible, our rocket ship is still taken off. Yeah, so we had Nick Woodman. He was the guest shark that day. So going into it, my dream team was going to be Mark Cuban and Nick Woodman. Both sports guys, self-made billionaires. I think they were the first two to go out, unfortunately.
Do you remember what they said, why they went out?
Well, right after I finished the memorized part, Mark Cuban literally yells, "I love Spikeball." And I'm like, oh my God, like
Yes.
this is like, I don't even have to do anything else. Deal's closed. Like, let's shake hands. And he shared a little bit about how he owned a Spikeball set. He loved it because his kids, I forget what age they were, but he was using it to teach them how to catch. It's easier to catch a ball that changes direction when it's coming towards you versus one that's coming straight at you. And
Yeah.
he wound up going out because of valuation. So he thought I had valued the company too high. I think maybe our sales was, I don't know, maybe 3 million at that time, and I think I valued it at 5 maybe. It was weird though because he never goes out on valuation, and whenever the other sharks do, he usually gives them a hard time for it. But Nick Woodman said he couldn't get behind a project that he's not passionate about, and he couldn't be passionate about Spikeball. But on the same episode, he invested in essentially a Tupperware container that has a lock on it. So if you want to prevent yourself from eating too many cookies, you use this thing.
I can see the passion behind that.
What I think it is, he's a surfer guy, a skater, right?
Yeah.
And surfers and skaters in generally are anti sports that have balls in them.
Okay.
Basketball, baseball, they're kind of too cool for that kind of stuff. So that was my take. But with that said, I think his stock was trading at about $90 at the filming of that show, and shortly after it dropped to 5 or something over the next
Oh.
year. So I hope he learned his lesson in shooting down Spikeball. But
But then you did have a shark bite.
yes, we did the deal with Damon John, or that happened on the show. And what happens on the show is more or less a handshake. Neither side is
Yeah.
legally
Tentative
bound.
agreement. Yeah.
Yep.
One thing I do want to call it, like, you stuck to your guns on the equity there. You said it was, the valuation was something that, drove Mark Cuban to ultimately say no, but you negotiated hard there. How tense was that?
I think Damon John literally called me greedy during our negotiation, and I was like, "Oh, geez." So yeah, we went back and forth a couple times, and I think I went one additional time, and that's when they like show the faces of the other sharks, and they're all kind of like,
You
like
blew
just
it.
cringing. Yeah, and Damon's like, "We got a deal," and it was awesome. We were the season finale, the final segment of the season finale.
Awesome.
So viewership was just crazy high, and but the interesting thing, we filmed that in like October of 2014, but we didn't air until May of 2015. So it was
Oh
like
my gosh.
7 months or something like that. So the deal actually died before it even aired.
Oh wow.
So after we filmed, I talked to Damon John a couple times in the months following, and he wanted to take the company a different direction. We wanted to keep doing what we were doing, and never officially called the deal off. We just kind of stopped calling each other, and I was fine with that. The money would have been nice to have, but we didn't necessarily need it. I went on the show hoping to get the expertise from one of the sharks.
Yeah.
So the deal never closed, and the episode aired, and we had a huge party at our office in Chicago, and that was 6 years ago. But we still get reruns, and reruns are happening like all over the world, like running in
Yeah.
Europe and everywhere, and it's this gift that just keeps giving.
You see a spike anytime like CNBC runs a rerun of it?
It's small, but yes. I shared a story a while ago. We get notes from retailers all over the world asking if they can carry our product. And a couple years ago, we got 5 emails from different retailers in Norway in one day
Oh.
saying, "Can we carry your product?" I'm like, what is going on in Norway? Like, this is awesome, but what? And it turns out Shark Tank ran the night before.
Ah, cool.
So yeah, it's a great vehicle. All the sharks were super cool. Even Mr. Wonderful was nice and complimentary, and he made a couple offers, and they were, you know, no good, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was a great experience.
And from that, you saw, that initial airing of the episode, you saw an increase in sales. And was it off to the races at that point, or
We
was
were already like Dick's Sporting Goods had called us months before any Shark Tank and said we want to carry your product, and holy smokes, like this isn't how it's supposed to
yeah,
work. I'm
this is
supposed to
awesome.
call you guys and beg and plead, and so we were already on the radar of some big players. Shark Tank definitely accelerated things, but I think there's a decent amount of people think that, oh, Shark Tank was what made Spikeball. No, we were gonna be. I could be off, but we were going to be awesome with or without Shark Tank, but it definitely accelerated things. We got tons of inbound from retailers. So I'd say that was probably the biggest. We had big sales on spikeball.com and Amazon that night. And then the weekend following, a lot of people DVR it. So you get the
Mhm.
huge spike the night of it, but there's millions more that may watch it in the week or two following because they had recorded it. It was tremendous, but I don't want to give Shark Tank too much credit because we were already doing
Doing
some
some
cool
good
stuff.
things. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it in Dick's. Where else are you on the retail side of things?
Target. We are in tons of mom and pop toy stores, sporting goods stores, spikeball.com, of course, Amazon, ton of retailers in Europe now, starting to add some in Mexico and South America. Yeah, and in a lot of regional sporting goods chains as well. So like Academy, Big Five, Shields. Yeah, most of the big ones.
What does the next year look like for Spikeball, ideally? Where do you want to see it go?
The vision of the company is to become the next great global sport. So a lot of people consider us this fun backyard game. That's fine. We have higher aspirations. We want it to become a legitimate sport. So we're hosting tournaments all over the place. I'm actually flying to Philadelphia Friday for our national championship. We're gonna have almost, I think, 1,000 players. Like I think we have like maybe 400 teams or something like that, all competing for the national championship. Next year, we will be hosting our first ever world championship. We were supposed to do it the last 2 years, but COVID eliminated it.
Right.
We actually did open registration in 2020 for it. We had, I think, about 20, 25 countries registered before we had to cancel it. But yeah, formalizing the sport. And we're working with like ESPN and TikTok, and they've been great in wanting to help formalize things and blow things up. So yeah, building the sport's a big one for us.
I love that so much. And final question, man. This has been so fun talking with you, man. And I love the growth. I love seeing this stuff. What advice would you give somebody who's right now sitting at their desk, probably on a Zoom, doing their corporate gig, but they have that great idea and they don't know whether they should take the risk and go for it?
Do it. Do something. Be smart with whatever it is you try, but at least do something. We've all had those ideas where you think of it, you do nothing, and then a couple years later you see that somebody else ran with that idea and you say they stole your idea.
Yeah.
Ideas aren't worth jack shit. You have to execute and do something. So Do it in a way that if you fail, you don't go bankrupt or the kids don't starve or whatever, but take that first step.
Chris Reuter, CEO Spikeball. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to The Changeup, produced by Elena Weedland, with original music by Rodney Hazard. If you liked what you heard, we'd appreciate your support by liking, sharing, leaving a comment, and subscribing wherever you listen. Thanks once again. Until next time.